Hey guys, welcome to TST Garage. I'm Bart, and in this video I'll be demonstrating the installation of our pod signal kits on Ducati, Panigale, and Street Fighter motorcycles. In front of me I have several different kits. We'll go through what each kit does, what the selections are allowed for you, and then we'll demonstrate how to install them on the bike with the help of our Fender Eliminator kit that's already on there. So in this video, I'll be portraying the steps necessary for mounting these components on a V4 version of the Panigale or Street Fighter bike. So let's begin. On the left side here, your right side, I have two different mounting kits. They will accomplish either outboard mounting, which means the signal goes right on the outside of your license plate frame, or we have an inboard mounting method where the mounting of the signals becomes very narrow and very small form factor, and some guys prefer that because there's less stuff hanging off the bike and it looks more cosmetically pleasing. Choice will be yours. We will equip you with the information on how to install either one with our signals that you see on my right, your left. Here I have the Mech Evo signal. This is a very techie design. It's not meant to be run-of-the-mill. It accentuates some very cool lines in this motorcycle and brings them to the rear and culminates in this very cool looking robot eye type lamp. Then we have a basic one. This is a customer favorite. It's called BL6. It exists in two different variants, sequential and non-sequential. The non-sequential will just give you a regular blink at the flash rate set by the bike, and the sequential will move the lighting, move a light sequence from center to outboard in a sequence for every blink. Then we have our Quadrix signal. It features 4 very high power LEDs firing through a very sophisticated lens array. It is a cool design where we left some space in between here and showed some of the circuitry by just potting it with clear epoxy on the backside. It looks really cool, and if that's your taste, we have them available. Then we have our Echo signals. These are CNC machined anodized aluminum. They come in black with a silver ring here. We do offer separate rings if you like to customize the look. This red looks kind of cool with the red of the bike. That's a pretty easy modification. You unscrew the cap and you change the ring, screw it back on, and you're good to go. Now, we don't recommend any of these signals except for the BL6 with our inboard method. That is because we do need a very slender design to fit in with all of these components so that it doesn't bulk up on you. You ultimately will be able to make your own choice. However, just know these are the only ones that are recommended by us to go with the inboard mounting method. On the outboard method, you basically just get L brackets with the appropriate hardware to get any one of these signals mounted onto the bracket, and then the hardware accomplishes mounting of the chunks onto the bike, onto your Fender Eliminator. Now in the beginning, I did say that we will be mounting these signals on our Fender Eliminator. They are meant to be universally applicable to our Fender Eliminator. I'm sure other Fender Eliminators can also benefit from receiving these lights. However, we don't have the data on what's compatible with our competitors' hardware, so take that with a grain of salt and make your own best decision based on your research. Now, most of the signals on the market nowadays include bullet connectors for connection. These bikes come with JST connectors from the factory on the harness, so we need to do something about that. I don't want you guys having to splice. So we've outfitted you with plug and play harnesses that will connect into the bike and present a means of connection for any of these signals that we provide and any other signals on the market that use the 3.5mm bullet connector, which is 95% of the equipment out there. So when you purchase a kit from us, you'll have the choice of the signal type, the mounting type, and then you will be receiving our plug and play harness. Based on all this information, I will be constructing a chunk for the inboard lighting and then showing how to install it on the bike. And then we'll do the same for the outboard lighting and show you in brief how to get that on the bike. If at any point you have any ambiguity in your understanding of what I'm doing here on the table or on the bike, we do offer these build sheets that have exploded diagrams They are available in the product pages for these products. You'll be able to get on there, download it, print it out for yourself, and this will help you follow along with what I'm doing and cut down on any confusion that you may have. All right, enough talking. Let's grab some tools and let's get to wrenching. A prerequisite to the steps I'm about to portray here is watching the video of the installation of the Fender Eliminator that we have on our YouTube channel and in the product page of that product. Obviously, we are mounting these signals with this product, so you will need to know how to construct the chunks I have on the table here. The closeout is just part of the entire set, but we don't really need to consider it at the moment. We have this chunk that is made up of the hinge bracket and 2 L brackets and some hardware that's holding it together. If you stop yourself during the installation, during the pre-configuration of the Fender Eliminator at this stage, you will be at the proper stage to include the bracket for our inboard signaling system, like so. And then you just use the countersunk screws that hold this entire assembly together in the same manner, just sandwiching our signal bracket in between. The nylock element of the nylock nut goes outward. That is the last part that will engage onto the threads and make sure that the threads are actually locked. I'm going to use a 3mm Allen from the outside, and the inside will be toolless because we have machined a channel into the L bracket that holds the sides of the nut. And this makes this whole installation a lot easier for you. What I like to do is go all the way to the bottom and then back off just a little bit, just to have a little bit of adjustability, because we're going to have to get that bracket to sit center. We're using the innermost holes. There are 3 on each side, so the least wide will be what we need to use. And back off a little bit. I'm gonna get this centered on here. Now we're centering 2 parts about the center line of the hinge bracket. We need to center this guy as it moves independently from the main license plate holding bracket. There are some features like this cutout here, and also visibility of the L bracket through the middle holes. So we could align this all together into a configuration that looks center on both parts. And once you've achieved center to your liking, you just lock down on these screws all the way. And now we have a nice low profile bracket here that will receive our signals. Now, I did mention in the intro that we will be using the BL6 signals. For this installation, I have chosen the sequential ones because to me they look the best. These do have a TST Industries inscription on them, so technically they're side agnostic electrically. However, it looks kind of goofy if you have this upside down and you have to flip yourself to read TST Industries. Choice is yours really, but I like to have it upright, so I'm going to choose this one upright here to be the left side of the bike, and the opposite will be the opposite. Let's remove the hardware from the stud. On the connector end, it's usually easiest to remove one at a time. I'm going to get both sides ready at the same time. All right, so now we feed the connectors through first, through the hole in our signal bracket. Slack milked out, and replace the washer and then the nut. Now using a 13mm wrench, you can just tighten down on this a little bit. We are going to leave a little bit of adjustability and do the final rotation and adjustment and tighten down on the bike. That way we can ensure that the actual center plane of the beam is parallel to the road, and you're actually firing this light in the appropriate direction. I've seen some kits on the market that have a low profile lighting setup that just shoot that light right into space. So we wanted to make sure that this is adjustable. So you can adjust your license plate angle and later adjust the center plane of the beam to actually fire in the direction that you need it to go. All right, so we have this one side constructed. I like to insert the wires through our bracket. There is an area here that bracket has, the hinge bracket has a cutout in it, and we will make use of that to pass the wires through and to the rear portion here so that we could reach the wiring hole of the closeout and get that to the top side like so. I'm going to repeat this same procedure on the other side of the assembly. Let's go ahead and bring the closeout into view, pass those wires through. If you are running a license plate light, I would like to urge you to watch the Fender Eliminator installation video where we portrayed how that is configured and how it routes through and how it connects to the bike. I will not be portraying it in this video for the purpose of the simplicity of portraying these steps in detail. So you would just need to combine the knowledge from the two videos to get that done together. All right, so now this is looking pretty neat. What I like to do is advance the shielding of the wire as much towards the signals as possible so that it hides the inner wires and also shields them from any elements of nature. Okay, I have the shielding forwarded as much as it'll go towards the studs of these signals. Now I'm gonna insert the hinge bracket into the closeout, making this chunk ready to go on the bike. But I do wanna pre-assemble the plug and play wiring harness first. That way, once we get that on the bike, it'll just be plug and plug, shove wires in, get it all mounted in, put some screws in, we're off to the races. This is pretty simple, yellow to yellow, black to black. The plug and play harnesses do offer an insulator cap. However, these things do slide around a little bit. So I will be using some electrical tape. Just have to make sure that they're fully seated. And that means the entire male bullet has penetrated into the female barrel. So now we have the insulator caps over the conductors. For this particular bike, what I like to do is lock them down so they don't slide around and then fold them over like so, and then throw another winding of tape around this bundle as tight as possible, because like I said, on this bike, we need to shove these wires in to where they will be stowed, and doubling them over like this and making them into a nice bundle will permit us to do that very simply. So I want to reiterate just one very, very important part. Before you throw these pieces of tape on, make sure that no conductor is visible from outside of that little shielding. So now I have a nice tight package with a pointy end that won't snag on things when I try to shove it through a couple of geometry features of the bike. So I'm going to repeat the steps on this side with the goal of achieving the same effect. Okay, so we have our Fender Eliminator chunk along with our signal chunk already mounted together. We have our wiring fixed up and ready to go. The remaining screws from the Fender Eliminator components will penetrate through these holes here. And now we're gonna bring that to the bike and continue the installation there. So here we have the bike disassembled to the stage where in the Fender Eliminator video, we were ready to accept all of these parts. If you are unclear of how we got here, please watch the Fender Eliminator video. I also want to note that these 4 fasteners are back in. As for this particular setup, I will not be showing how to install the license plate light, as I've already shown it in the previous video. So if you are doing a license plate light along with this, these will need to be out and this will need to be pried off, but you can get that instruction from the Fender Eliminator video. All right, we have our chunk combined here. We have the wiring with the type bundles we spoke of at the table, ready to go in. We will need to shove them through this little orifice here where the wires are coming out of. We have the left and right signaling wires with connectors. They are labeled. Ducati makes it very easy for us. We have an L and an R designating for right and left signal. That's very nice. I'm gonna dislodge the license plate light connector this way. I'll be able to push these off into one side and have a larger gap to push my wires through. So let's first find out which wire bundle goes to the right signal, and it's this one. I'm going to connect this to the right, opposite one to the left. We'll power up the bike and test it. Right, left. All right, I'm good to go here. Power back down, and now we'll do some cable management. So like I mentioned, I want to have all of the wiring bundles off to one side, and that way I can get my new wiring in. Once the thickest part with the taped bundle is through, it's really easy to get that all down in there. Get my connectors into their stowing areas. That way I know what I'm doing moving forward. It's much easier to get the wire lengths appropriate at this stage if those things are held in their stowing points. So we can have a little bit of bundling here, as these wires can collapse on each other, on themselves, and they don't create enough bulk to push the closeout off. Just need to make sure that that is kept to a minimum. All right, so again, like in the Fender Eliminator video, we're gonna use this tab up above this lip here. Get that seated in, push the entire assembly forward. Once that tab is up there, like so, push it in until it makes a little snap noise. And then we'll use the screws from the Fender Eliminator assembly to finish off the installation. Thread them in. Engage the threads first, making sure both sides are engaged. All right, now with the closeout and Fender Eliminator completely tight against the bike, now we'll need to adjust our hanging angle for the license plate, and then also do a final adjustment and lockdown of the lamps. So the adjustment of the plate angle is done as per the instructions in the Fender Eliminator. Use a 4mm Allen, unlock the hinge. Now this is movable. I like to set my angle right about here. This is to my liking. Choice is yours, but you will have to be prudent about that choice. If you put it up vertical, there is a chance that during wheel travel, you will hit this license plate. It is very high, it's very unlikely, but again, kind of looks weird. So I do like it on a slight angle. I'm gonna place it here. So that would be my angle that I'm going for. And now we need to make sure that these signals are actually positioned in a way that the lens is perpendicular to the ground and the center of the beam is parallel to the ground. So I'm going to adjust them by hand until that positioning is reached. I'm just looking at my lens, making sure that the lens is actually perpendicular with the ground. I'm going to do that on both sides. And then we will need to tighten this down with a tool. Just want to get it tight enough by hand so that it doesn't shift on me when I start moving components around. Okay, we have lens perpendicular with the ground. Lens is parallel with the other side of the lens. Now we will need to access the nuts that accomplish this tightening, so we have to loosen this up one more time because the only access we have is through the top here. Be careful not to strain the wires. You might need to pull the wires out a little bit as you rotate this down. Okay, now the trick is to use a 13mm open-ended wrench and tighten down on the nut against the rubber, preloading the rubber with a little bit of force so that the exerted friction on the bracket here prevents it from moving. Don't want to over tighten this as the overmolded stud may tear out. It requires a lot of rotations against this thread, so it's very unlikely. Just know that once this is tight, you really only need like a quarter to a half a turn to preload it appropriately. And we also need to prevent the rotation of the signal body because then we'll knock it out of the adjustment that we just made. So I'm going to hold it tight and give it just a little bit of tightness. Now to check if it's tight enough, just mush them around. If they're not rotating, they're good to go. Vibration's not going to change their placement. Now I'm going to grab the 4mm again and lock this assembly, the hinge, in the previous position. And the way I'm going to find that position is by making the lens perpendicular to the ground again. Hold the assembly as you turn against the hinge screw. And now we get our license plate back on. Okay, I'm gonna give her one last test. Right signal, left signal, all systems are functional. So that'll be it for this chunk. In the next chunk, I'll be portraying the outboard signal version of the signaling equipment. I'm gonna use the Quadrix signal just because I wanted to demonstrate it with something different. You're free to use any of the lamps that we offer here at tstindustries.com, and they'll mount pretty much the same. They all have the same hardware that mounts them onto the components of the Fender Eliminator. For this next presentation, I have returned to this configuration of the Fender Eliminator components where we have the license plate mounting chunk separate from the closeout, and we also still have the screws that will mount the whole thing to the bike separate. So now we will need to make this sort of a chunk out of each set of components here that will then subsequently mount behind the license plate holding bracket, and the license plate will end up mounting here. I have pre-made this chunk. Here I will show you how to make another chunk out of this Quadrix signal and then use all of these components with the license plate to mount it all together. All right, let's get the washer and nut off of this stud of this signal. Find it easiest to remove one connector at a time. The L bracket has a round hole and a slot. The slot is meant to align with the license plate bracket. The round hole receives the signal, we go from the outer side, not the inner side. The signals themselves are side agnostic. It doesn't matter which side you put them on. They function just as well and look the same on both sides. So then we drop a washer on here and then subsequently a nut. It will perform the final tightening on the bike. So for now, we're just trying to make sure that it's not a sloppy situation where it'll just be cumbersome. So I'll get it roughly in the angle that we're going to be hanging it at and then tighten down by hand. Now we have both sides ready to go. So for the physical mounting, we will use the license plate from the outside. The hardware kit for this pod signal mounting kit comes with 6 washers. This is a universal kit. 2 of those washers are meant for a different configuration, so we will only be considering 4 washers, 2 of the locking nuts, and 2 16mm long M6 screws. Stack up will be screw, washer, license plate bracket. To that, we fix one of these signal chunks from the backside, washer, and a nut. If you are running a license plate light needs to be clamped in between the license plate and the bracket during this step. So make sure you go over the video for the Fender Eliminator installation, get your instructions there, and then transfer that step to this portion here. Now I will mount the other side using the same component stack up. If you notice, I'm just doing everything finger tight here. Once we get this mounted on the bike, connected, and it's self-supporting, we will go through the necessary steps to adjust everything, make sure everything's hanging center, level, and the plane of the beam is actually along the ground. Okay. So now we have this chunk ready to go. We will need to feed the wires through the wiring hole in the closeout. Again, too many of these connectors in a bunch will bunch it up for you, so we go one at a time. Now there's several ways to route the wires here. You can go over the top of the hinge bracket and then subsequently like this, and that achieves pretty good hiding the components here. I do like that configuration. An alternate configuration is to, before penetrating the wires and the connectors into the closeout, you get that fed through the channel that is cut into our hinge bracket. That is also a valid choice. Here, let me back up a step and show you guys what that looks like. You will have to make that choice for yourself. So I think I like this configuration quite a bit more. Just looks a little bit neater. Keeps the wires out of view. I'm gonna stick with this one. All right. So at this point, we'll need to do some wiring. It's gonna be very, very simple. However, you do need to consider the fact that the blue wire remains not connected to anything. These signals are running light capable. However, the running light is amber, and for this vehicle the tail light's already really big. It won't be running any additional running lights, so we'll leave that disconnected. For the wiring into our harness, we're going to go red to black and then brown into yellow. Making sure that they are fully seated. The entire barrel of the male connector is inside the cavity of the female. And then we have these insulator components that slide over each other. They will isolate our conductors from possibly touching each other. However, they do have the tendency to slide around if there is motion in the wire bundle. So what I'm going to do is lock them down. And you like to lock them down with some electrical tape. First, I inspect and make sure that there is no conductor popping out of the containment here. And then I use a little piece of electrical tape across where the two caps meet each other. All right. Now, one additional step I like to make is to bundle this wire like so. I did portray this in the previous chunk of this video where we installed a different type of signaling configuration. This helps me push the wires up into where they will be resting. So once I get to this point, I'll grab the tape roll and get this tightly wrapped. And this will leave me a little point at the leading end so that I don't catch any snags while I feed the wire in. And the rest of it is just making sure that all of my conductors are completely covered and nothing will slip out in any event in the future. Okay, so this is ready to plug in, this is ready to penetrate in and get stowed. I'm going to repeat the steps on this side exactly the same as I just showed on the right side. The wiring setup is now complete. Hardware configuration is complete. Let's grab the mounting screws and then get on over to the bike and we'll complete the installation there. All right, let's get this thing on the bike now. Here you see the bike left at a stage where it's ready to accept these components. This stage was attained in the Fender Eliminator video. Here's a note though, we are not doing a license plate light in this chunk because we're just focusing on these components. So if you're doing the license plate light installation along with this set, you will still need to have these two sets of fasteners out and this pried up, and you'll combine that step into what I'm about to show you. So to get our signals in, we'll identify the appropriate connectors here, the male connectors designated L and R, left, right. Just need to make sure that we are actually connecting to the correct side. You can follow the wires. Here I have the right one. And opposite left. Before I do any more work, I'm going to test it real quick. Right, left. Okay, we're good to go. So now we do have these bundled up wires that we made in a way that they won't snag much on the way in, but we are feeding through a pretty small window here. So I'm going to undo all of the connectors from the stowing area and push everything to one side. This will leave me a nice large channel in there to push my wires through. I'm taking care not to tangle these things very much here. I will need to get as much of this wire shoved in and distributed inside as possible. So I'm going to hang these connectors back up where they go. Push on this wire, all the wire bundles, until I achieve the appropriate minimal bulk here. Okay, so this looks to be a pretty good configuration here. Some of this wire will pull out when I go to the next steps, but we've distributed most of that bulk underneath all those components, and now all of this that still remains will be easily housed in there. You need to make sure that this tabs up above this lip here. So we'll pop that in, push the entire assembly forward and down. And then when it's in the appropriate position, all the edges line up, and you can just pop the closeout in, and now it'll be self-supporting. Grab the screws that we use for installing this on. It came with the Fender Eliminator assembly. Using a 3mm Allen, I will start those threads. Start both sides before tightening. All right, let's go ahead and tighten all the way down. Now we're at a stage where we have these guys still kind of loose, and they can rotate about this fastener here. So I'm gonna make some decisions now. What angle do we want the license plate to be hung at? First, going to unlock the hinge and make that decision. When you do that, just be careful not to strain these wires. All this stuff rotates together. It may be tugging on the wires, so just be wary of that. I like this angle here. I'm gonna tighten that down all the way now. You want to support the assembly as you turn against the hinge. Okay. Now, I need to make sure that these guys are level, and also the surface for mounting the signals. Where's that gonna be? Do I want it flush with the side of the license plate or out? I like them flush, so that's where I'm gonna put mine. One additional consideration here as we're starting to make these adjustments is you still have some mobility side to side in the license plate. So you need to make sure that the license plate is actually centered. So I hold the outside sections, outside tabs of my signal brackets, and I translate left and right until I find the configuration where I like it. It's also, you do have some rotation about this axis here, so you need to make sure that it's hanging level. Once you find that sweet spot that you like, let's go ahead and tighten down just a little bit. I'm gonna leave just a little bit of adjustability, but otherwise I'm gonna have it down pretty tight. This is basically from my last check, making sure that the signals will end up being level. And I've achieved that here, so I'm gonna use a 10mm open-ended wrench from the back side of this assembly on the nut that fastens onto this component here. And I'm gonna tighten down on these connections all the way. Now I'm gonna use a 13mm wrench to tighten down on the nuts that hold the signals onto their L brackets. Before I tighten those, I need to make sure that the center beam of the light emission is parallel to the ground. And the way to do that is basically to set the lens perpendicular to the ground. Now, as I'm about to turn that nut in, I'm going to hold the entire signal assembly, making sure that it doesn't rotate on me, so it doesn't fall out of adjustment. And how tight do I make these? Well, the nut turns onto an overmolded stud. The stud is molded into the rubber piece that allows for a little bit of motion in these. If you over tighten that connection, it will rip out. To over tighten it, you really have to turn against it a lot. It'll mushroom before that happens. So my rule of thumb here is to tighten down enough so that as I mush it around and move it around, it doesn't rotate. If my hand doesn't rotate it, vibrations won't. Let's go ahead and tighten this side as well. Preload that rubber with the right amount of force to cause that friction. So now this is all complete. give it one more test. Make sure all of the systems are working properly. Right, left, good to go. All right, you guys, that's pretty much it for this installation video. Thank you for watching. Hope you found it informative and helpful. If you did, check out tstindustries.com. We have these parts ready for sale, ready to ship to you, along with the Fender Eliminator that you see here and a whole host of other parts for this bike and other bikes that you may have in your stable. See you later.